For the past month, I've been focusing on a 90-day full life reset, and this week I'm focusing on my finances. This is a complete overview of everything I've done this week to reset my finances for an organized 2025. I like to use a top-down approach when I look at my finances, starting with a big overall picture of my current financial situation. I do this by calculating my net worth. Net worth is a pretty simple equation where you take your assets, that's everything that you own, and you subtract your liabilities, that's everything that you owe. If your number is negative, that means that you owe more than you have. And if your net worth is positive, it means that you own more assets than you owe money to your creditors. Assets are things like your house, collectibles, anything that you can make money off of if you can sell. They're also liquid assets. That's things like how much money is in your bank account and how much cash you have on hand. I start by assessing my major things, and I don't put in things that would take some effort for me to sell. Things like my engagement ring is technically an asset, but I don't put that into my net worth assessment. I could also technically sell things like my camera, my TV, but I don't add that into my yearly calculation of my net worth because I'm really just looking at the overall big picture. You can decide the level of granularity that you want to use when you're doing your own asset assessment. When I calculated my net worth, which you can see in this video here, I took into account the current value of my home, the current value of my car and my husband's car, as well as all the assets that we have in our bank accounts, our checking and savings, as well as our retirement and investment account. Then I subtracted everything that we owe. This is things like mortgages, car loans, credit card debt, student loan debt, outstanding loans or balances that you owe to companies or other people. We tend to keep our debts really low and simple, so we just have our mortgage and our student loans. Once you take everything that you own and subtract everything that you owe, you have your net worth. If you're interested in seeing how you compare to others, it might be helpful to use data from the U.S. Census Bureau. I'll leave a link to their pamphlet down below. They provide an overall median net worth for the U.S. population, but I think it's more helpful to look at net worth by age ranges, and it might be more helpful to compare yourself to other people in your age bracket. And that's because we tend to have a lower net worth when we're first starting out in early adulthood, and that net worth tends to rise over time. So if you want to compare your current situation to the U.S. national average, you want to use the breakdown by age ranges located in that pamphlet down below. That gives you a macro look at your financial standing, but I think it's more helpful to dig down deep to understand your monthly spending and your daily spending. In order to understand your current spending habits, it's helpful to take a 3-month look at your finances. You can do this by downloading any of your debit or credit card accounts, which document how you've spent your money over the last 3 months. It's important to look at a wide enough range of your spending habits because a month may not really be representative of how you're generally spending your money. But a 3-month snapshot is going to give you a pretty good general overview of how you spend your money day to day and month to month. There are always going to be statistical outliers, especially if you choose a month like November and December, where we tend to spend more money, or the summer months, where things are generally different for families, especially families with children. I took a look at my spending in August, September, and October so that I could get a general snapshot of how we're spending our money. In this video, I reviewed how I use behavioral science strategies to do a holistic look and classification of all of my spendings. As a behavioral scientist, I use psychological concepts and behavioral science strategies in the way that I live my life and the way that I'm running this 90-day full life reset. But you don't have to go into that much detail. It might simply be helpful for you to have some general categories and for you to understand how much you're spending in each of those categories. Those categories could be things like bills and essentials, groceries, clothing, entertainment. I'll leave a link to some resources which include a variety of ways for you to classify your spending. I used Ramit Sethi's conscious spending plan to understand how I was spending my money. He strikes a nice balance between having a dozen or so categories versus 30 or 40 categories that you might develop on your own. Once you understand your current spending, you can see where you need to make modifications in order to meet your financial goals. Which brings us to one of my favorite parts of doing a financial reset, and it's really similar to how I started my full life reset last month. This is an opportunity for you to dream big, and Ramit Sethi uses the term your dream life. I like to think about my ideal month. Think about what's important to you. How do you want to be spending your money? What are your short and long-term financial goals And are you behaving consistently with those goals? This is also a good opportunity for you to think about your values. I did a full values assessment in this video right here, and when I'm helping clients work through designing their dream life, when we look at their values and compare that to how they're spending their time and money, when there's an inconsistency between those two things, there tends to be a general unhappiness. And when there's a consistency in what's important to you and how you spend your time and how you spend your money, we find that there's an overall improvement in general life satisfaction. And that's consistent with therapies such as acceptance and commitment-based therapies, where the goal is to fully understand your values and then to work to act consistently with those values. It's one of my favorite therapeutic techniques that I use in my work as a clinical psychologist. And if we haven't met before, hi, my name is Dr. Jamie. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist as well as a coach, known as the Productivity Psychologist here on YouTube. If you're interested in how to move your life forward using evidence-based practices and psychological principles, consider subscribing to this channel. All right, now that we know how we are currently spending our money, as well as how we want to spend our money, this gives us an opportunity to modify that conscious spending plan, which, by the way, is slightly different from a budget in multiple ways, including a shift in your mindset from a budget, which potentially feels limiting, to a spending plan, which allows you the psychological freedom to feel like you're doing the right thing and spending money consistent with your plan. So there's a little bit less psychological stress related to a spending plan versus a budget. But it might be a little bit more challenging if you have to make large changes in how you're spending your money. All change is hard, so it's important to give yourself some grace as you're going through this process and to have some sort of metric so that you can see how you're doing on this journey. That brings us to tracking your spending. It's difficult to know if you've improved something unless you have a concrete metric to determine whether or not you're doing well or you still have a long way to go. This is right up my alley since I study human behavior and I'm all about tracking things. There are several different ways that you can track your spending, ranging from old school paper and pencil to some pretty advanced apps. And frankly, you might need a combination of ways to track how you're spending your money. I go through some options in this video, and ultimately, I've decided to use You Need a Budget, which is an app specifically developed for you to track every dollar down to the penny. Knowing where you stand financially, knowing your net worth, and also having a conscious spending plan for how to move forward might be enough for some people, especially if you're just starting out with personal finance. But if you want to push yourself one step forward and you're here to grow your knowledge and understanding of personal finance, it might be helpful for you to educate yourself by reading some basic books on personal finance. My top 3 recommendations for books if you're just getting started are The Index Card, which breaks down 7 basic principles of personal finance, I Will Teach You to Be Rich, which gives you a 1-month plan to get right with money. And finally, I couldn't be a psychologist talking about money and not mention The Psychology of Money, which shows you that money and personal finance is so much deeper than just the numbers. If you've read those 3 primers and you find yourself still a little stuck in how to move forward for 2025, I recommend seeking the advice of a financial advisor. Actually, most of the personal finance experts explain that personal finance isn't as complicated as it seems. And you definitely don't need to pay a 1% fee for a financial advisor that will continue to eat away at your investments and charge you more and more over time. I've chosen to seek out a fee-based financial advisor. You pay them a one-time fee of $300 or $500 to review your current financial state and possibly answer specific questions that you might have about your individual situation. I've used a fee-based financial advisor to help me understand how much I needed to save for retirement, how much I needed in an emergency fund, and also to look at my numbers and see if the distribution of my spending made fiscal sense. We're fortunate, being a military family, we have access to these fee-based financial advisors through the military. Your company might have a similar service, and that might be a good place to start. Since I tend to get into the nitty-gritty in all of my individual videos, this video was meant to give you a general overview of how to integrate a financial reset into a larger full life reset. As I've mentioned throughout this video, I've made individual videos on each of these specific processes. So if you're interested in checking out those videos, check out this full playlist right here. And as a psychologist, I just want to remind you that your net worth is not your self-worth. And just because you're here now doesn't mean you'll be here in the future. And that rings true if you're better than you thought or worse than you thought. So there's no better day than today to start planning for your financial future.